as we head towards approving our annual plan for the next financial year. So we'll look forward to the briefing from staff shortly, the updates on that. Before we go there, I'd like to invite, we've got a couple here, two that are here to speak this morning, just to one of the topics in the workshop. This isn't normal practice for us to do a public speaking time, but they're here, so we may as well make the most of this. So welcome, Anna and Simon. Appreciate you coming in, and love to hear what you've got to contribute this morning. Welcome, Councillor Halliday. Nice that you're here.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for having us. My name's Anna Carter. I'm a long-term resident of the Kapiti Coast, and what I wanted to talk to you about today is really piddly compared to sort of the line items that you guys are going to be discussing in your budget. But as I undertook my own annual planning process on my own household budget, I was looking at things that I could be saving money on. And one of the things that I adamantly did not want to cut out of my budget was swimming lessons for my kids. And so I'm here to talk about the swimming pool charges. I've got 3 kids. My oldest is 19, he's at Vic Uni, and then I've got an 18-year-old, he's at UCO and Palmy, and then I've got a 10-year-old. So my 10-year-old that's swimming and doing swimming lessons with Simon here at the Paraparaumu Aquatic Centre. But we've been through the Kapiti Learn to Swim lessons with all 3 of the boys, and for all 3 of them, and now Heath, they get to a certain point and they start to really disengage, and it's really frustrating. And I'm a swimmer, and I just think swimming is critical to their health and well-being, and so it's just really important to have them swim in whatever manner that makes them swim. And so when I found out about Simon's swim classes, which are run through the Paraparaumu Aquatic Centre, I gave them a go with my youngest son Heath, and he's just been thriving for the last year. And Simon's swimming techniques are, they're just different to the way that what they teach at the Kapiti Learn to Swim. We got approached recently by the swimming pool management to say that because Simon's classes are commercial, that all the kids in that class have to pay an entry fee on top of paying his term fees. Now, we're paying term fees to Simon, and that includes a commercial lane fee that he's having to pay back to the aquatic centre. But on top of that, we're now having to pay $3.30 every time he goes to the swimming pool to swim with Simon. So I contacted the aquatic centre management to ask them about why we were being charged this extra $3.30, and they came back and advised me that it was based on the swimming pool charges that are available online, and that Simon's a commercial user of the pool, and therefore our children have to pay a commercial entry fee on top of their swimming pool, their swimming lesson fee, and that there's no discretion. And so I said to them, well, where did that come from? Where is the providence for around the application of those commercial fees? And they pointed me in the direction of the long-term plan. So I went and had a look at the long-term plan, and that's why I'm here today. And I sent an email back to the management just asking for further clarification, but I haven't had it. So if you just bear with me, this is what I wrote in my email, and I'll read it out. When I read the long-term plan in relation to funding the aquatic centres, it's not been specific as to how user fees are to be allocated. And the long-term plan allocates user fees, and the long-term plan has identified the significant benefits that our aquatic centres provide to our community. And so to reflect that, they have, I guess the council, through the long-term plan, has apportioned somewhere between 70 and 75% of the operational costs to the wider community benefit through a community targeted rate. And the remaining 20 to 25% is to be covered by user fees. Now, the long-term plan doesn't specify who those users are. It just says user fees. So my question was, at what point have you identified a commercial user, and specifically kids who are going to swimming lessons as commercial user, and why are we being charged over and above what kids going to Kapiti Learn to Swim are being charged? They don't get charged entry fees, for example. And I just noted that the performance measure set out in the long-term plan is actually all about, the performance measures include users who are satisfied with the pool's services and facilities, visits to the swimming pool, and learn to swim registration. So there's a target there of the number of kids that that they're trying to achieve through the swimming pool facility. And I when I was reading the long-term plan, it states quite clearly that all users of the pool are beneficiaries of the pool. It states that, and I quote, individuals and community school groups that use the pool are the primary beneficiaries of the activity. The benefits are private and exclusive, and therefore it's appropriate and acceptable to charge people to use the pools. So we understand that it's necessary to charge, and that's that 20 to 25%. The bit that I'm querying is why are children being singled out who are getting swimming lessons, say through someone like Simon, over and above children who are swimming through the Raptors Swim Club or children who are swimming through Kapiti Learn to Swim. We're all looking for the same outcome for our children, which is that they can swim, that they're confident in the water, and that they love, swimming as a form of exercise. So I just note that also at the long-term plan states that although there is a large degree of private benefit to users of the aquatic facilities and programs, the council does not consider it appropriate to fully recover the cost of this activity through fees and charges, as this would create barriers to access for those people on low incomes, and therefore council consider it appropriate to subsidise a significant portion of the activity costs from community facility targeted rate. I guess my question to you for your consideration through this workshop is, one, was it the intention of the long-term plan to actually put a differential charge in for commercial users at the pool, or was the long-term plan intended to provide for all users to pay that 25%, all users to pay for that 25%, not just commercial users? If you find that, yes, commercial users should be charged over and above all users, then my second question is, do you think it's fair to charge children who are getting swimming lessons an additional fee when the intention is to be able to enable them to learn to swim? Is there anything that you want to add, Simon?
I suppose all I'd like to say on the matter is it's about the kids. Drownings in New Zealand are far too high. Right across the board, that's children and adults. But if we can mitigate at this level at a young age, it's where we should be starting. And the charges at the front door for children coming in to simply get swimming lessons, that extra charge over and above what is, say, charged through the council. And I offer advanced swimming. So I've got kids of 6 years old swimming kilometres, lengths of the pool. I take children, I honestly don't even know how we do it, but it happens. We instill a passion of swimming into them. This charge is just yet another barrier for them. And it's a barrier for families to be able to provide that safety and those swimming lessons to their children. One of the things that I was told was, unless I am a registered club or a charitable organisation or a school, which I am a school, I'm a fully qualified swim teacher, I'm registered with Swimming New Zealand, I run at a loss with what I do. So that's just put that out there. So my question was, well, is the pool trying to run at a loss? Is the pool trying to cover its costs? So therefore, they would be subject to their own policies in regards to charging their users, their families that are coming in for swimming lessons. What is the difference? Unless the council is a charitable organisation or registered as a club, why am I being singled out? There is the opportunity for families to choose different swimming providers, which has just been taken away through this. We're all community. All of the children, all of the families that are in my classes, we're all part of that same community. The same community that's using the pool swimming lessons are the same families that often progress into my swimming lessons because it gives them another level. My focus is on water safety, fitness, and confidence, and a long-term passion for swimming. So, and that is the key for me, is that long-term passion. But I just want equality across the board for all of our community and all of our children, and just to be able to give them the option of different swimming providers. They call me commercial. I'm not commercial. I've done this for years voluntarily. The only reason that I had to start charging was because of the people were just paying the entry fee, coming into me, and I was teaching them in a lane every Monday and every Friday. I've got my teenage children who come along who are qualified coaches. They've gone through, they've been competitive swimmers. They're coaching there. It wasn't until I started being charged that I had to pass those costs on. I finish work at say 2:30 every single Monday and Friday at this point. I'm losing money to go and do that because it's a passion. I want these kids swimming. If you guys could come and see them and see what they're doing, these kids are amazing. And I just want to be able to keep on providing that for our community. And I think that just the charges at the door and just surely there's some discretion, surely. I mean, it seems that it's just unwavering. There's no room for movement. But surely there has to be something that we can do to be able to provide a good, safe environment for these children. And that's all I've got to say.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not very eloquent.
But you are passionate. That was very clear. So I've got a question from Liz, Councillor Coe.
Can I just clarify then? So you are paying, Simon, a fee to the pool to use that facility.
Yes, I get
and then
invoiced.
your students, if you like, are paying as well. That
On top
sounds
of
to
that.
me like double dipping.
It is,
Yeah.
yes. And that's another thing that we have brought up and asked about. I have to be very careful not to get offside with the council staff. I don't want to have conflict. And for years, I've been doing this for years. I've been doing it for 8 years out of the pool. And I've got a very, very good relationship with them. So I've been trying to work with the pool staff to find a solution to this. But it's really coming to a head now.
Yeah.
You know,
okay,
things
no,
are tight and
yeah.
families are struggling.
Strikes me that you've got a valid point there. So thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Thank you,
I
ma'am.
don't know how others feel about it, but yeah, it sounds to me like double dipping. Thank you.
Okay, from what we've so we've got a list of all the charges that are proposed for the next financial year, and I was just having a look at those, and there's a commercial lane hire proposal of increasing from $13 to $13.60 per hour, and then there's a child's. This is the $3.30. It's the entry fee for every child who goes in, whether they're part of lessons or not. And that's the $3.30 that it is currently. That is proposed to go to $3.40 under the new annual plan. So those are the figures that you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the $3.30. It's not the lane charge that. Well,
It's not the lane hire.
Yeah, that's the commercial lane hire, which I assume is the one that you pay as a.
Yeah, that's fine. I totally understand that because we are taking a lane, you know,
Yep.
and I'm happy to pay that per lane that we use.
it's just the additional.
It's
cost
the
of-
additional,
the
yes,
additional cost to
the
the
entry
family
fee when you're
themselves.
already paying that.
That's right, which is
Okay.
not being charged to children going to the Kapiti Learn.
Going to the Kapiti Learn to Swim, they're not paying that same thing, and it's just taking away options
All right.
for them.
I appreciate you coming. One of the things I've just spoken with staff about, I notice Councillor Pravanov has another question, but we won't be able to answer your question specifically right now because we don't have the General Manager and staff related to this in here, but for councillors, later on this morning in the workshop, we will get a staff member in to talk to us about the swimming pool charges so that you can ask them any questions that you might have. But I will commit that we will come back to you with some feedback from what the questions that you've asked us today.
you.
Okay,
Really appreciate it.
all right. Councillor Pravanov. Oh, Martin's first, sorry.
That's all right. Through Mr.
Sorry,
Chair.
Councillor Halliday.
Look, just two questions I had, just on just a little bit of clarity, if that's okay. Is there any formal sort of access agreement that you have with the pool or anything like that at all? Is there an arrangement per se? Is it a spoken arrangement or is it a formal one?
It has been spoken. It's become more formal, at my request.
Yeah.
Just so that I can have some clarity and security around it going forward.
Cool.
So I do. I've had a schedule emailed to me for the rest of this term,
You know
and
that-
I'm trying to get a schedule for the next term.
Right. I guess that's why you're trying to get that arrangement so that you can get surety moving forward with regards to your bookings of the lanes and stuff.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
right.
You mentioned that is the lane fee picked up as a charge? Sorry, there's two aspects here. There's the lane fee and there's the individual charge. But did I hear you say that there's already an individual charge or entry fee as part of the lesson fee that you charge? Or is it just a lane fee that you currently pay and the kids come in and use the lanes?
So I pay the lane fee, and the children are stopped at the front door and asked to pay.
Right.
Yeah, we
And-
pay on top. We pay a
That's so-
term fee to Simon,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they pay a
and
term
then at
fee
the
and-
door we've been asked to start paying the entry fee on top
So
of that.
that term fee,
Yeah.
does that cover, was that, so I'm just getting an idea of the, how the structure works. So that term fee that you pay,
Yeah.
does that cover the kids' access to the pool?
No.
No, so the fee that you pay just covers the lane hire. Is that right?
It covers
Covers lane
Simon's
hire,
time.
coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
That's
that's cool. It's just getting an idea.
Yeah.
So what you're, okay, so just for clarity, the kids that are coming, have been coming in up until whenever they started getting stopped at the door, not paying an entrance fee per se, the pool's getting the fee through the lane fee.
Previously, I was paying that on top. I was covering, but it got too hard for me to taking numbers and then going through.
Yep.
And it just because I'm so focused on just giving lessons,
Yep.
and I was just going and paying that entry fee on the numbers that were coming in,
Yeah.
and it's just a real time constraint for me, and it takes away from what I'm doing. So I'd rather just
Yeah, so you'll stop. So you're not charging. So you're not collecting those entry fees. So
No,
you,
no,
So you
no,
have
no,
been
no.
collecting those entry fees, so it's like I'm passing it on. Had it? Was that the case?
previously, yes, not for a few years.
Yeah.
And some parents, I had informed everyone,
Yeah.
but some parents just kept coming through, and then the pool staff said, "Oh, look, can you just send out a message to the parents that they must be paying as the guy." I said, yeah, that's no problem. So I've sent that. That's all been done. Yeah.
And that's why I've picked it up, because I've been told, and that's when I started looking at what other parents at Kapiti Learn to Swim were being charged, which was nothing.
Sorry, just clarity on that point there. So is this the Raptors Club?
Raptors and Kapiti Learn to Swim.
Up to the council's,
both of them,
the
yeah.
council's lessons. Yeah.
And masters.
Okay, so the arrangement they have is different from the arrangement
Yes.
you have.
Yeah.
They don't
Okay, no,
they
that's-
don't get charged at the door.
And even the master swimmers who are our age, they're going through. They pay $1.
$1 to go swimming and to use the sauna.
That's
we're
great
getting
to know
charged.
because it's what we can find out. We can get some comparisons.
That's why I was thinking there must be some discretion. If there's such a, if there's that range of prices
Yeah.
cool. through,
Okay.
there must be some room for movement at least.
Lovely. That's right. That's lovely. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for coming in and bringing this to our attention.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Pravanov, do you still have some questions?
Yes, thank you, through you. Thank you, Anna and Simon, for coming along. My first question is, how long have you been charged? How long have the pupils been charged this extra fee at the door?
8 years.
Okay, thank you. Because I know previously there have been some conversations, and I'm probably looking at it more from the Waikanai Swimming Club in Waikanai, about introducing a lane fee per student every time they come along, and that's always been squashed.
Wow. Because it's the same council, isn't it?
Yeah, and so I'm just trying to understand why there seems to be an anomaly here. And I know when it's been put forward to us, it's very clear in the annual plan of the long-term plan that there is a specific fee. And are you saying, Anna, that there's no line item in the fees and schedule charges that show that extra cost that Simon needs to pass on to his students?
It's showing up in the swimming pool charges as a commercial user, but there's no justification in the long-term plan for it, and no justification in the swimming pool charges for it.
Yeah.
And it's an inequity because, you know, ultimately we're all looking for our kids to learn to swim. They learn in different ways. I have used the other options, Waikimai Swim Club and the Learn to Swim, but you've got to find something that works for your kids.
Oh, I agree with that, and I think it's probably really important to have a conversation with the pool manager or whoever is implementing this rule to actually get clarity about.
I've come across quite an
Under what
aggressive
rule?
stance from management.
Pardon?
So I've come across a very aggressive stance from management, like very, very aggressive. So I've sort of stepped back so as to not fracture the relationship.
Yes.
My thoughts were that, look, if we need to recover 25% of the operational costs, let's spread it across every user, which is what the intention of the long-term plan is all about, because then the cost will be far less. I mean, Simon's only got 14 kids in his class. You know, they go 3 times a week. But look, if we're putting all of those costs onto Simon's class, I don't know who else has been charged this, by the way.
Could I just add one thing? So just as an idea of the inequity of it, I will have 14 children in one lane.
That's my question. So it's just
Teaching
this is
them.
one lane, is it?
I'm negotiating with that. I'm trying really hard to get more lane space. And
So you have one lane.
So, and then I look over at the Raptors Swimming Club at the same time that I'm running, and they've got 3 to 4 lanes with one child per lane. My children are currently swimming at a higher level than the swimmers of the same age at the Raptors Swimming Club. And just for all clarity, I used to be a coach, a competitive swim coach for the Raptors. I've done that alongside what I'm doing now. So at one point, 90% of the Raptors' new swimmers and junior swimmers were coming from my program directly, because I'm a registered professional swim coach with Swimming New Zealand and a teacher of competitive strokes. And that's what I give to the children, and they have the option of doing whatever they want with their swimming skills after they leave me. They can be triathletes, they can be competitive swimmers. There's a range of skills that I'm giving them alongside that water safety aspect.
Yeah, thank you, and I really appreciate you coming along today to talk to us about this. And I think it would be really good to get clarity from staff and for to see where this will end up.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We really appreciate your time
Thank you.
and putting us in.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Oh, sorry, Shelley had one more question.
I've got one question.
Councillor Warwick.
I think what you're doing is awesome because kids do need to learn to swim in whatever form they want to. But how formal is it to be a club? Like, does council require you? You could call yourself a club. Does it have to be formalised in any way for the council to accept it?
I don't know, but the rules seem to be pretty rough and ready. I mean, it seems to me, I don't know. I don't want to say that I'm just being singled out because, but
I'm sure there's some stuff going on in the background that all of us are unaware of in terms of decisions that have been made by pool management with reasoning behind it, and at the moment we don't have that information.
that's
So I
right,
think
yeah, because
making assumptions and aspersions
I have
on
asked for that though. I have asked for that clarity, and I've asked a question over a month ago of because they've said to me, I'm not registered as a charitable organisation, I'm not registered as a swim club, and I've asked the question, is the council swimming lessons registered as a club? Are the council lessons charitable? Are we just sponsoring them as ratepayers? They will not answer that question. They refuse to answer, and Steve said to me, Simon, you better stop asking that question because you're not going to make any friends, buddy. In exactly that manner. That's what he said. That's what he said to me, and that's how he delivered it to me, face to face. And
Okay.
I said, hey, it's just a question because you should be following your own policies. What you're saying the rules are for me, why can't they be the rules for you? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, not you. I mean the community, the wider community, the community that's using your lessons, the community that's using my... I said, we're all community. Look at my kids over there, Steve. They're swimming, they're having fun, they're enjoying the facility. Look at the kids in your lessons, they're doing the same, you know. And he said to me, and his parting word was, I would not bring that up again because you will not make yourself any friends. So
Thank
I've had
you.
to back right off
Yep.
because I don't want to fracture that relationship with the pool, and I felt like that was a veiled threat that could occur.
Thank you, Simon, for that. One of the things we're just conscious of that staff member aren't here to respond to those comments,
Yes, I
and so
understand
I'm
that. I
super
understand that. I only
super
added
aware that
that
that's,
because of the question that
yeah,
was posed.
yeah. So what we will do, as I said before, is we will come back to you with some feedback on your questions. I am sure from the sound of what's going on around the table and the chatter that there is a bit of interest in this from the elected members in terms of digging in and finding out some more information. So thank you for your time. I
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time.
Fantastic. Good start to the morning. We're just getting the microphone set up for staff as we move into the rest of the workshop this morning, number 3 for annual plan. I assume all of you received your email on Tuesday afternoon. I think it came through that's got the documents, the presentation and stuff that will be referenced today. And that any of you who had questions have sent those through already so that we can expedite things today. So we're ready. I'll hand it over to Mark to take us through the presentation. Thank you, Mark.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. So welcome to the annual plan workshop number 3, public workshop number 3. So as it's a workshop, obviously you can't make decisions, but it is in terms of our schedule, it is the last workshop before we essentially inform the community of what the annual plan will entail and what the average rates increase is going to be. So you're going to hear very little from me today. I'm actually going to hand over to our acting Chief Financial Officer, Jing. She'll take you through some financial slides. We're then going to go through the fees and charges schedule. So no doubt some of you will have, well, obviously we've got some queries from this morning, but the idea is to make sure that you're comfortable with the fees and charges schedule. Because in terms of with our dog registrations, what council does is typically we adopt the fees and charges schedule in May, which helps to streamline the dog registration process because dog registrations must be paid, I think by mid-August. So the fees go up. There's lots of dogs that need to be registered, and council has always done this where we give our community as much notice as possible of the changes to the dog registrations, so that we get those dogs registered. So after that, we'll be looking at we'll be showing you some examples of what we call our information campaign. What information will be. What are the channels that we're going to be using in terms of informing the community what the annual plan is about, and importantly, what decisions you've made to get the annual rates increase from 14 down to a new number, and then we'll finish off with some next steps. So, so as I just said, so these are the component parts of what we'll go through. Now, in terms of the presentation, yes, this was sent to you on Tuesday evening, plus the fees and charges schedule. I think in terms for staff, it would be helpful if we could keep questions limited to the slides that we're actually on. And in terms of the actual the structure of the presentation, there are actually slide breaks as we go through. So that would be a good time. We'll stop. We'll check that you've got some questions. But if you could just ask questions for the particular slides we're on, I think that'll just streamline the process. So we are here to make sure that you're comfortable with what we're proposing. So we will answer your questions, but I think if we have it in a sort of a structured way will be best. What we've done in workshop 1 and 2 worked really, really well. So this is exactly what we're going to be taking you through. We'll recap just briefly what we discussed at workshop number 2. We'll recap our journey so far and where we are with the average rates increase. There is a proposal there to reduce a little bit below what we finished on in workshop 2, which is excellent news. We'll look at some rating examples so we can see in dollar terms a bit more context. What does that mean for various properties within our district? We'll look at the big one, number 5, is the fees and charges, and then we'll look at the information campaign, and then we'll wrap up with next steps. So I'm going to hand over to Jing.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you through you, Mr. Chair. So that's what we're going to do today, is to talk about the annual rates increase and our annual plan for the next year. And I'll just recap on the workshop number 2, so you know what we've discussed at the workshop number 2. So the message is clear that we stick to year 3 of the long-term plan, so there's no changes of level of services or our strategic outcomes. And we hear you on the workshop 1 that you wanted to understand our profit and loss and how our annual rates as building block works. So we presented all the draft statement of comprehensive revenue and expenditure. So you'll see how our revenue is comprised of, which is like the development contributions, the fees and charges, and our rates revenue. And the next one, we discussed the annual rates building blocks to show how our rates revenue requirement was determined. So we will need expenditure for maintenance and professional services, depreciation, and our rates reduced by the fees and the charges and some operating grants. So then next we're looking at show the how our debt requirements is actually come up. So you'll see our capital program, which we need to borrow money for our capital program, but we do receive capital grants, which is Waka Hautahi, that 51% of capital grants for our capital projects. And we also have our development contributions for our capital grants. So you'll, at workshop number 2, you see our debt, we probably increased about $54 million at that time, just for our capital program. Then we give the councillors the full schedule of our capital program for the next 3 years. And we're looking at 89 million for the next year's capital projects. The next one, we discussed the fees and charges exceptions to LGCI index, and LGCI is come at 4.2%, which is lower than the current inflation, everybody knows, 7.2%. And because local government there are different categories of purchases, so it is lower, and we've done 4.2% across most of the fees and charges, but there were some exceptions that we presented last time. And today, later on, we'll have our staff member to talk through the fees and charges, because we hear you had some changes to make, and so we'll present it back. And the last thing we'll said is an overview of our information campaign. What are we going to do next after this workshop? So that's the recap of our workshop number 2. Thank you, Mark. So we talk about draft rates increase for our annual plan 23-24. And we come up with 12.4%, you all know, at workshop number 1. And we had some options to come through, is to unfund some depreciation for the water assets, and also we're looking at repurpose of our better funding. And so we have come up with the workshop number 2 at 8.1% for the draft annual rates increase. We also, from there, we know our long-term plan is on 7.9% of annual rates increase. So we have gone back and revisited our numbers, and we have further options to reduce our rates. And you could see the two options presented there. One is we increased our growth forecast from 0.6% to 0.7%. This is increase our rating units. So growth percentage is all about rating units, and the rating units go through our development of land, and also you have to be rated through Land Information New Zealand. That journey is actually quite long, and there is a timing. Sometimes takes 3 months, sometimes could take 9 months. But we have done our projection based on the current known factor to 0.7%, and we'll know in the long-term plan we had 1.3%. So that growth has reduced nearly half of it. Then, sorry, yes.
Sorry, Jean. So just to add, so generally speaking, when with new developments, when certificate of titles are issued, it effectively formally becomes a rating unit. So as Jing said, it's only when we have confirmation of certificate of titles do we actually confirm the growth. So obviously we had forecast 1.3% growth this year. We are still tracking behind target, but following workshop 2, as we always do, we check in with our rating team, and our rating team has confirmed that as of now, we have 184 new rating units, which is 0.7%. So we're really, really confident that we can actually increase our growth from 0.6 to 0.7 because it's based on actual rating units today. It is possible. It is possible that as we continue to go through the next couple of months, we'll get to the 30th of June and that growth might be stronger. But we're prudent. We've always based our growth on actual. So, but we have had a few certificates of title issued, which is great news.
Thank you, Mark. So the next one we'll know the.
Yes. Yep. Sure.
I have some questions about the slide. Or have you finished talking to the slide or not?
No. We'll finish the slide and then.
Okay. Right.
Thank you. Right, so the second option we have is the removal of the expenditure for the Te Orohi project. Since the council meeting on the 16th of March, and there was a decision made, so we went back to check our numbers in the long-term plan, annual plan, that we had revenue expenditure for the project, so we removed all the expenditure for that project. So that gave us 0.2% of reduction of rates. So we now, from the 8.1% we presented at the workshop number 2, we now come under 7.8%, which is lower than the long-term plan 7.9%.
Okay. Councillor Coe.
Yeah. Okay. So when we cancelled Te Orohi, we did agree to continue with the outcomes that that project had. Now, I'm hoping that we have budget for that. So I'm just wondering what has been allowed for. If we're saying, we're removing the net expenses of Te Orohi, have we factored in that actually we still intend to spend money on those outcomes, but in a different way? So for example, we need to up our expenditure in terms of promoting kapiti and telling the iwi story and various other things. So I think to just remove, carte blanche, those net expenses will not enable us to follow through on what was agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Thank you, Councillor. So I guess the first part of so I'm not sure is my answer to your question. What we have stripped out is actually we assumed that Te Orohi in year 3 of the annual plan would actually be in operation. So what we've stripped out is the budgeted costs for rates, for power, for security, for depreciation. So these are actually, what we've taken out is operating costs of the actual facility. And so, given the decision that council has made, it made perfect sense to take that out. So that's what that represents, is those costs that we provided for, which related to the facility.
Yes, but we agreed that we would still spend money on those outcomes.
Yep.
And so I'm expecting to see some line items in the budget around that. Otherwise, we can't achieve what we agreed to do.
Yeah, just to add, I don't believe we've added any extra money in to do that work, but I think the expectation is that the work would be done on the back of funding that's already available within that area. Now,
No, I don't think so.
if that's not the case,
not the
then
case.
this is, well, I guess there's two things. I'm not sure how much does that actually equate to in terms of dollars? About $150,000 of OPEX.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we can't
So-
just, you know,
Yeah, I was-
sacrifice other outcomes. Like, and you know, we've had a constant battle to spend money on economic development and tourism attraction, and to me, this is just like, you know, I mean, I had a meeting with George Hickton yesterday. I mean, that whole group is feeling extremely demoralised around the cancellation of this project, and I said, well, actually, George, you know, don't feel demoralised, because we have agreed, you know, that there will be spending on those outcomes just in a different way, and you know, they need budget to do these things. You know, economic development and tourism attraction is really important in our economy, especially right now. So I think we need to have some funding in there to cover what they aspire to do.
Yeah, so there was two things I was going to talk to. One was I'm not aware that additional money over and above what's already in those areas, other than we do have the capital money for the McLean Park, and there is the storytelling. So there is some capital cost
There is some
budgets there
yes.
that can accommodate some of that work. But the other point was exactly that. If the council choose to leave this funding in and to allocate it towards, it's unfortunate that we don't have Chris here, towards some of that work from
We
an
need
economic
to-
development point of view, then that would be open to you to do that today. I guess the other side of that conversation is, I mean, I don't know what that number should look like in terms of a budget estimate, or if there's any business case around what is a suitable amount of money to look to supplement those outcomes through some other mechanism. But at least if you left this money in, then that's a starting point in terms of dollars.
That's right.
So again, that's absolutely an option. You could choose to stick to.
Yeah, I
Yes,
you know, I
yes,
want to
they are.
repurpose that money, you know, rather than
You'd be at
wipe it
8%
out
probably.
altogether.
Would you? So you'd end up being at 8% as opposed to 8.1
Well, if
potentially.
that's what we've got to do, that's what we've got to do, and as far as I'm concerned, because we need to spend more money in that area. It's just that Te Urahi was not the right way to do it. We want to spend it on different things.
So I guess the bit that's missing is like staff can't tell you what that money will be linked to in terms of. Normally we'd put up a business case, or you'd see where the expenditure was going,
Yeah.
but
Well, I think
that
I-
work hasn't been done, so it's not.
I
not
just
that
think
I'm
we
aware
need
of.
to have a provision in there, and we can do some, you know, the agreement was there would be some projects put in place which need to be scoped out, so we need to think about how that money is going to be spent, but there needs to be a budget allocation. So, but also the other question I have is in terms of releasing the Better Off CapEx funding. So am I correct in assuming that, okay, if we swapping out CapEx for OPEX, that does require an increase in debt, doesn't it? Otherwise, we're not doing those CapEx projects. And are we being explicit about that? And I guess the other thing is in terms of, I think it's not, I'll leave it to the next slide. There's another slide around the fact that the costs are one-off. But I'll talk about that later. But yeah, I just think we need to be explicit about the impact of swapping out that CapEx for OPEX. Yeah.
So through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor. So no, we aren't going to increase our our anticipated debt levels because we are reprioritising CapEx funding into OpEx. What we've said is those projects that we were going to use the Better All funding will be funded from within the existing program. So we've got $88.8 million assigned for the CapEx program. It's a total CapEx program. And as we've heard from Jing, is to actually deliver on that, our debt drawdown or increase in our debt will be 54. So that'll be funded. So we know we aren't going to deliver on $88.8 million. So we will not be drawing down extra debt to do extra projects. So
Okay.
it'll be funded from within. So the debt levels
Okay,
are probably not even going to get to 54 million based on not being able to do a lot of those projects.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coe. Councillor Halliday.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. It's a similar vein of questioning, to be honest. But I just wanted some clarity. Before the project started, the base for the funding was $2.25 million that was allowed for in the long-term plan with regards to the restoration of the Tuku stream and some sort of work with regards to biosecurity as such. So we've spent 1.5 million, which is what I've been told, and we're going to hopefully claw back 500,000 from the DIA. So to me, there's a $1.25 million budget still remaining there. Well, I would expect it to still be remaining there as part of what was meant to be used as delivery of the Te Urahi project. Now, the whole kaupapa changed with regards to a larger project being put together. Is that money still there?
No, so the capital money was taken out as part of that process of stopping the project, reforecasting. The remaining CapEx is not still in the budget. There's other capital expenditure there for, I mentioned the storytelling, there's $150,000. There's obviously the McLean Park upgrade work. But the changes that were made as part of the last annual plan was to add more funding in. We started at 2.2, there was work done, we then got to, I think it was 5 or 7, there was an increase in that budget. That money has been taken out from the capital works program.
I personally disagree that it should have been taken out because the actual motion undid the motions as such. Didn't cancel the project, it undid all the motions. So what it should have done is taken the project back to that budget with 1.5 of it having been spent. And we're starting again with regards to what's been done with that particular bit of budget. Yeah, so I think this has been part of the problem with regards to the understanding of what was done with that motion, because it's sort of morphed a little bit, and it's been called that it stopped it just stopped the project. Of course, it did, but the method that was used to stop it was quite deliberate with regards to that. So yeah, I'm surprised to hear that, to be honest. I would have thought that budget was still sitting within the frame. So that's been removed when? Through this particular annual plan process?
That's right. We wouldn't put up a capital project with no basis for the funding with an amount of money associated with it,
But there was
without any detail as to what it was going to be spent on.
Well, that was already done. That was done. The 2.25 initial allocation had no plan to it. That was meant to be used to form the plan around it. It was actually used to create a $4.5 million project we could claim 50% funding on. That surprises me quite a lot because my expectation was that budget would still be there. It's been allowed for. It's been allowed for a specific purpose, and that purpose actually has yet not been met.
Yes, focusing on the outcomes.
So the
Without
question,
labouring that.
yeah,
Outcomes in terms of operational expenditure, capital expenditure, delivering of a structure. The plan originally was for a structure to be associated with that work on that site, which was the biosecurity, which was the storytelling features, which was the bridge. All of that work has stopped, and that capital money was directly linked to that project. There's more work going on in terms of operational expenditure to look at how you might deliver on some of those outcomes that may lead to input into a different capital project. And there are a number of capital projects going on in that space that might be enhanced as a result of that. We've also talked about, I think, the library, community centre. There's all of that funding still, nothing's changed in terms of that funding. But yeah, we wouldn't, and I thought the resolution was pretty clear that everything should stop in terms of Te Urahi Te Urihi was linked to the funding was linked to a plan which was linked to that capital expenditure. So we've just taken that out, and we're actually looking at trying to recover more of the what was spent back from the DIA in terms of that funding. So that work is still in progress. But yeah, the capital money that was linked to that is no longer in the budget.
So I guess my comment on that is I'm disappointed to hear that there's been no conversation with us with regards to that, because quite frankly, I haven't supported this project right from the beginning for all the reasons that it ended up not going ahead, and all the what came to fruition, all the things we discussed right back at the beginning as being problematic actually happened. So from my perspective, it's like, okay, well, I was in the minority of that decision-making process. I had to wear that for 3 years, and then so as far as I'm concerned, that disaster of a project that ignored local requirement, in my opinion, through lack of engagement in the correct manner, has left us in a very interesting position, because now I'd like to get it back to where it should have been, in my opinion, and I've been pretty solid with regards to my views on that. We should be going back to that initial community group, and right back to when the report came back in 2019, looking at those outcomes that came back from that report, and moving forward from that point. And at that point, that budget was in place for that conversation. We've gone down a pathway. That's all been undone and brought it back to ground zero to start that conversation again. That budget wasn't specifically put in place for the Te Urihi project. That was a project that was put together around the PGF funding. It might be splitting hairs, but that's how I perceive this moving forward.
Yeah, sure.
So just one, so you can't use capital funding to fund a feasibility study or a study into what might become something. It has to be linked to a specific asset in terms of that cost. So I think what would be good today, we do need to steer in terms of the, if council want us to retain that 100-odd thousand that's proposed at 150, that certainly could be used to enhance or add to what's already available in the economic development space in terms of operational funding for conversations about what those outcomes might look like in a different shape and form.
Look, I beg to differ on that. I'm sorry, Sean. But that funding, when it was put in place in the long-term plan, that wasn't targeted for a specific project. It was targeted towards doing some feasibility work and paying for the project within a defined budget. So we're back at that point. Nothing's, if you just ignore everything that's happened for the last 3 years and take it back to that point, that budget was there for that. I'm struggling with that one.
Okay, your struggle was noted, I think, there, Martin. For me, what is clear from staff at this point, and the question that Councillor Coe has raised here, is a steer on that 0.2%, and whether we want to remove that to keep our rates down, or whether we want to reposition that towards some money being put aside for those outcomes specifically. I probably have a secondary question that sits alongside that for me is, I guess I don't know whether we do have dollars that are assigned through other means that would produce the outcomes as well that we've already got in our budget, that would help us to fund the outcomes that we are looking for. But in the end, what I'm hearing from staff is today is our last chance to give them a steer on this particular one, which Councillor Coe has raised, validly asking the question, I think, about how we're going to fund these outcomes that we do want as a table, and we have expressed through our previous motion to cancel Te Urihi. So that is something that I think we need to make a decision on this morning. I don't know whether we can provide an answer about whether there's any budget currently in our budget that we can be using for those outcomes, or any money that's assigned there, or whether we do need to specifically assign some of that, if not all, of that 0.2% to that.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I think today's workshop's clearly going to be fluid, so I think, as we progress, because I do think probably the big discussion point today will be the detail behind the fees and charges. So just like we'll be having a look at the matter that was raised this morning, we can actually go away and just find out whether or not we've got any budget included in the draft annual plan for progressing the outcomes work. And once we know that, we can report back. You do, just from, as a reminder, you have had an increase of $2.4 million for operating costs that potentially could be used for some of the outcome work. But we'll go and check that. So, and we'll do that before we finish the workshop.
Okay. So is that,
Well, can I just add in something a bit more specific, and that is the Tourism Advisory Board has a budget of just about or close to zero. So I would see definitely some of the Te Urihi money being repurposed for them to use at their discretion in terms of achieving our objectives, our desired outcomes of telling the Kapiti story and promoting Kapiti Coast as a destination. That to me is an absolute bottom line. They have to have a decent budget to work with to achieve that outcome. And one of the outcomes is also to look at whether we ongoing need to spend some money on a biosecurity facility. That is a CapEx line, potentially. So there needs to be at least some provision in there for that. Otherwise, again, we're not going to achieve that outcome. I don't know what that might look like or even whether it might proceed, but if we haven't got a provision in there for it, well, there's no point even looking at it. So those are just, to further clarify. Thank you.
Yep, I'll just endorse what Liz is saying. I've got another question though, which is separate completely from this one here. You talked just then about we've got a CapEx budget of X amount, which is substantial, but that realistically we won't more likely end up fulfilling it, so to speak. So have we made allowances for interest as such in relation to that, say, $84 million? And if so, how does that impact on our rates requirement if it's not, we don't actually get there as such? Has that been factored in? If we're 10 million short, that's a significant figure from an interest perspective, which would actually make a bit of a difference on there. But then again, I guess that, because that's an operational, interest is an operational cost, isn't it?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we do. In terms of when we do our financial modelling, when we calculate the interest, we actually assume we know what the capital spend will be for the year. So interest is calculated on 6 months of the year because we know there's a timing difference. You can't possibly calculate the interest with that level of accuracy because we're sort of crystal ball gazing. But we certainly don't budget for a year of interest on the drawdown. We have a really some of the projects are spending several years. So those projects that are in train, we have a clearer idea of the likely timing of the debt drawdown to calculate interest. But for the ones that haven't yet even started, we'll take an assumption. Two assumptions we make is that we only charge half a year of interest. And then the other thing we do is what finance always do is we obviously work very closely with our activity managers. We work through the detail of the capital program, but we apply a little bit of a haircut as well to that because we know there's often unforeseen reasons that things don't go to plan. So and look, it's an estimate. So it's just like staff. We don't budget for 100% of our staff contingent for 12 months of the year. We do actually do some discounting. So we've already factored that into the interest calculation that goes into the rates revenue requirement.
That's great. Thanks for that, Mark. That makes that quite a bit clearer. I guess my second question on that one then is when we get to the end of the financial year, if there's a differentiation between that, what happens to that differentiation? Does that just get picked up going forward into the next plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of the differentiation, are you talking about where we finish on capex, or where we finish on interest, or on debt? So basically all of the above. So the long-term plan is effectively a 20-year prospective financial statement forecast. When we calculate our debt requirements, our starting position is always, well, what is our current debt? And that's how our forecast interest calculations are based on our current plus our expected. So in Workshop 2, we took you through how we actually calculate how much debt we will draw down. The interest on that is driven from that drawdown plus actual debt of the day. So again, this is one of the reasons why we do annual plans. It gives us the opportunity to reset our budgets based on what we've actually spent and delivered in the previous year. So that all gets factored into our financial modelling. It does make it somewhat tricky because we're actually setting an annual plan for the following financial year, which we haven't finished this financial year. So there's always a bit of an estimate.
Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you. Through you. It's good. I just want to clarify, just to really be very clear on this. So, Mr. Mullen made the comment how there's no movement of money between capex and opex, and that there is still some capex in the budget relating to McLean Park and storytelling. So, given the words up there, it's got here removal of net expenses for the Te Urahi project. What does that actually mean? What is that? What? Yeah, it's not. Yeah, what does that actually mean?
He did.
So
He did talk about this earlier in the presentation
Yeah.
about exactly what it was, but I'll give you room to respond to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. So when we were, I guess, developing the budgets 3 years ago, our assumption was that Te Urahi, the facility, would be in operation for
Yep.
year 3.
Mm-hmm.
And our assumption is that we would have staff members in that building. We would have operating costs. So we'd be paying power. We would have we'd be paying rates on that. And so we also budgeted for some revenue. So the tour operators to Kapiti Island would be paying for fees. So we included that in our budgets. And so we had some small budget provision for revenue, and we had a whole lot of expenditure. So the descriptor, the net expenses, is actually we've taken out the revenue and we've taken out the expenditure.
Right. So, and behind all that, there is still some capex money, which is what you've talked about in terms of the storytelling and work for McLean Park.
There's some better off funding. Some better off funding is being used for the storytelling and artwork of McLean Park. But in terms of the capex for Te Urahi has been taken out.
So other than that, there's nothing there.
Well, we're going to go
I know,
away
at
and have
this
a
point in
look
time.
just
Yeah.
to double check whether there's any
Right.
provision for the outcomes and just get clarification. Is that outcomes of a capex nature or of an opex nature? Because as Mr. Mellon correctly said, is that any feasibility studies you cannot capitalise. That's an opex expense.
So given that, and I hear what Councillor Coe has said, is that a decision has to be made or a steer has to be given by councillors is to potentially change that from one form to another.
Yeah, that's right. So I think, just to confirm through you, Mr. Chair, where I think where we're at now is there is a question mark on whether or not there's budget for the outcomes. If it's OPEX, if the work is of an OPEX nature and there's no budget provision, the councillors will decide whether or not, instead of taking that 150,000 out, you would actually apply that to the outcome work. So once we can confirm that, we can then ask you to give us a steer whether it's 8% or whether it's 7.8.
Just the capital, and if that funding is used to deliver, if you want to build something to reflect those outcomes in some different shape or form, it'd be unusual to go through that investigation, design, construction, all within a 12-month period. So putting more capex into next year, that's one of the reasons why with the funding that we don't always deliver everything. Trying to get that all done in 12 months is very difficult, especially if you're wanting to engage in some level of community consultation. And just design, construction, tendering, building, you'd be very unlikely to do anything in 12 months. So, yeah, so that gives you the opportunity to lead into putting something maybe through the LTP that might look slightly different, or adding funding to some of those other capital projects off the back of that. So,
Well, I suppose also too, it may not be even in that site. It may be in a number of sites. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, we haven't really got many slides on the average rates increase, because that's been really the star of the show for workshop 1 and 2. It's really getting you. This is it, really. We haven't really come back to you with the economy, but I know for many of you around the table, you will be reading the latest information. So what's come out this week is property prices are deemed to drop a further 7%. The recession is definitely here. Cyclone Gabrielle is likely to increase inflation even higher, which means that the OCR tightening, which tightens next month, is likely to exceed the 5.5%. So all economists now are really starting to say households are going to really struggle. So it's your decision, and you must give us direction which way we go. But it is getting a lot harder out there.
Absolutely. Noted. Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, just kind of I don't know whether it's a question or a comment, but there might be a question or something to respond to in there. In terms of the kind of outcome work and the extra recommendation that we worked up that went alongside the suite that essentially put a stop to the project, which I very much appreciate then why the capex that was assigned has now been removed. I think the part of the intention behind including that was to see those outcomes woven through other capital work that we're doing, and across kind of a broader range of projects. So it's not just pinned to one thing that we're hoping will deliver on that opportunity for Mana Whenua stories to be told and our Kapiti story to be articulated. So I'm personally kind of happy with that being built in to other projects, and I'm keen as well, kind of as you get some more information back in terms of what funding is already allocated to achieving those outcomes, whether if there are any specific projects you're aware of that are really having these as central to what they're trying to achieve. Like you mentioned briefly the library. If we think about some of our kind of town centre redevelopment work, is there an opportunity to kind of weave in some of these elements through there? And also just noting that on our strategy ops and finance work program in Q1, we're refreshing the destination management plan, and included in that is how we will achieve the Te Urahi outcomes. So I kind of think it's potentially a broader conversation that maybe doesn't need to solely rely on this particular 150,000 of OPEX, because I think if we think more kind of with some more agility about how we meet these outcomes, I personally am happy with where we're currently sitting.
Can I just throw in there that the destination management plan is not sufficiently resourced? That's the issue. So it's all very well to rely on that to achieve our, tourist attraction outcomes, but there is not sufficient resource in behind it at this point in time. That's my understanding.
Okay. Great. Well, I'm not seeing any more lights, so that's it's probably gone down. We've given some steer there in regards to information we'd like to have back before we probably approve or don't the 0.2%. I think in terms of the growth forecast, we're all really happy to see, we'd like to see that probably increase by another 0.1 would be nice. So we can get it down to that 7.9, that'd be perfect. Or lower. I think that's our goal. Well, if you get another 0.1 on the increased growth, you get down. Anyway, so my target at the moment is let's get through the rest of this, fees and charges, have a short break, and then go into detail on the fees and charges after the break. Okay? Is that cool? So we should be able to get through these. There's only, from my looking, there's only 4 slides left before we can go into that break. So we'll hand it back to you, Jing.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. And so we'll go down to just, yep. Okay, so this is just show you our journey for the rates increase. We started back in December, if you remember, 14%, and then down to, could be 7.8% or 8% today. So this is our journey really looking at how we actually found our interest, how we found our capex, how do we repurpose our bit of funding, looking at our growth, looking at all our operating projects. So that's our journey to show you how we decrease our average rates increase for 23-24. And then we're looking at how we drive the 7.8% increase. Remember, we also always going to have the non-discretionary increase. We know inflation, depreciation, interest all adds to it is already 8.9%. And remember last workshop we presented the P&L, and you have seen our other operating expenditure and professional services all come down. So our staff, activity managers have gone back and revisit, what other things they could stop for good reason. Then we're looking at comparison of the annual plan versus the long-term plan for year 3. And we will see the rates revenue because of 7.8% and was 7.9%. If you remember correctly, this year we had 8% in the long-term plan, and we decided 7.5%. So that's why you see our rates revenue actually lower than the long-term plan. And our growth projection has reduced from 1.3% in the long-term plan year 3 to now the 0.7%. And our capital program has already also revised we know we couldn't deliver the full program this year, so we pushed it out to next year. And our depreciation hasn't moved a lot is because through the revaluation of all our assets class, and because the replacement cost has gone up, all the materials, labour, all have gone up. So that has really a big impact on our depreciation cost, because that's mainly through the revaluation of our assets. And unfunded depreciation that also increased. If you remember, to reduce our rates, we had a 441,000 for depreciation through the revaluation of our water assets. We have decided that's going to be unfunded to ease our cost pressure for the rates increase. And our closing debt, we started it this year. We haven't finished, but when we did the annual plan this year, we had $225 million. And our capital program for the debt borrowings requirements, you remember last workshop we said is $54 million. So because we always borrow $5 million chunk, so we down to $55 million, increased to $280 million. And our interest expense has increased by quite a bit. It's just because the interest rate, as you all know, even for mortgage from 2 to 3% to this over 6% at the moment. So that's had a big impact on our borrowings, even though we only 20% of our borrowings is on variable cost and 80% are we hedged. So we protect in that way, but we do the 20% of borrowings for variable interest cost. The next one is we've done some rating examples based on the 7.8% rates increase. And be in mind, we do not include the Greater Wellington Regional Council's rates in there because we still don't have the final rates increase from them yet. So this is just showing what our increase is likely to be for each of the wards within the district. and majority is around the $200 mark. Because when we repurpose our better funding, you'll remember there's around the two waters. So that's why you see the rural area is 11% rather than lower than 7.8%. Is because the stormwater, wastewater, they are on septic tank, so it doesn't really apply to them. So their rates are still higher than 7.8%. Oh, yep.
So through you, Mr. Chair. So look, I think that slide is actually largely positive. What we reported to you in workshop 2 is there's really no such thing as an average rates increase. It's really the difference between 1 year compared to the previous year on the rates revenue requirement after growth. That's what it represents. But this is positive because our rating system, as you know, our rates are levied based on land value, capital value, and fixed charges, and it's our fixed charges that have quite a big impact on rates increases, because they aren't reliant on the capital value or the land value. So generally, if you have a property with a lower capital value, they're paying the same fixed charge as a property with a higher value. So what's pleasing is after we set the rates on your instruction, we often do get, the rates team do get flooded with phone calls saying your average rates increase was whatever the number is. Let's say it's 8%. Mine are far higher, and you must have made a mistake. But it really does depend on the nature of the property. So what is quite pleasing here is we know why rural is higher, because the relief from the Better Off funding isn't really helping them, unfortunately. But looking at those numbers on the property, these are median properties, and they're all below well, we were proposing 7.8. They're all sitting below that. So, that's quite pleasing.
Thank you, Mark, and through you, Mr. Chair. So the rates increase was that one of the options we had was apply the 3.2 million better funding capital project to the operating projects. So we're still going through that process at the moment to looking at, because we still need DIA to approve for that, and we still need iwi engagement to agree to the repurpose of the better funding. Right, so we're going.
So there's two lights on. Councillor Pravanov is in there first. So
Thank you, through you. If we can just go back to the previous slide. So just to clarify, or no, just I suppose it's just to clarify. So that those are median property values. If just to understand, or for other people to understand as well, that the increase is based on, for example, if the capital value of a property is higher, will the percentage increase be higher as well?
So through you, Mr. Chair. So if the capital value of a property is higher than the median, it's likely that the rates increase will be higher, yes.
So that's for medians, the middle, so
Yes.
more than at least half of the ratepayers will have an increase in their rates.
Yeah, well, through you, Mr. Chair, but you can also apply it the other way.
Yeah.
Half of those
Yeah.
values will be lower than that. So their rates will be lower.
So,
their rates increase will be
Yes.
lower. Everyone has an increase. It's just
I
the
know
percentage.
that. Yes. So I suppose, do you just off the top of your head know the range in rates? I assume actually that everyone does have an increase. What the range is between the lowest increase and the highest increase? Obviously, rural is higher there, but I'm not sure whether some of those other classes where there's a high capital value, whether or not they actually would be paying even more than 10%, 11%.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. No, look, I don't have the range. So to do that is quite significant financial modelling, and we haven't done that because you haven't said 7.8 is actually acceptable. What we've done to get these examples, we have we've based the revenue requirement on what you've seen, which is 7.8, and we've run that through the model for those particular property values. So I don't have the ranges, but what we do as part of the long-term plan, we do that review of the rating system where we actually deploy those very complicated models, and then we present to you those bubble charts, and then we do have the ranges, and look, we do have outliers. We do have outliers in this district that are way down and are way up. But generally, the concentration of the bubbles is around about the median mark. So a lot of the properties are sitting at the median value anyway.
So just remind me, and maybe it's a bit further down the line, is that there was an app where people can go in and actually plug in what their rates would be. I can't remember where that happens in the process.
There's a rates calculator online on our council website. Just hasn't been updated for the coming financial year.
So so when's that likely to happen?
So through you, Mr. Chair. So look, it's a little bit complicated because we also reliant on Greater Wellington Regional Council. What we want out, so you can go online. It's called the Rates Tool Calculator. So for the rates this year, you can put in your address, bang, it tells you what your rates are. We are working with Greater Wellington in terms of our planning. We're going to be talking to you. The information campaign is going to run from the 26th of April to the 26th of May. We have an undertaking from Greater Wellington that we'll have their rates that we can put on the model, so that when people, so by the time we're informing the community, they can use the online rates tool calculator, which will show them, because we think there's very little point in just having the tool telling them what our rates are. They need to see our rates and Greater Wellington. So what will they be paying over the whole year? So we are waiting for them. They're going through the same process that we are. They need to have it approved by their governing body, but it should be online from the 26th of April.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Coe. No, Councillor Halliday is next. How did he sneak in?
It's that vision thing.
Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah. I never used to get missed when I sat on that side. Just saying. Can we just move back one slide further, please? Just a little bit of clarification from my end. We've got depreciation at 29.1 in the draft annual plan, 29.8 in the long-term plan. So had we just for clarity here, have we made the provision as part of the long-term plan to be paying 29.8 million depreciation? Was that and as such?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So the $29.8 million was, again, that's the LTP year 3, which we did in 2020 effectively. Okay, so and that assumed that we year on year delivered our CapEx program. So that's why it is higher. So 29.8, if we had done everything we said we were doing, less the haircut that we always apply, we would have higher. So the LTP assumed that we would have built more assets by year 3, because that depreciation is year 1 and year 2's assets flowing through into year 3. So it's higher because we assumed we would have built more.
And if you like, the slack's been taken up because although we haven't delivered the same amount, it's cost more. Correct?
So we're seeing that this year. We're seeing greater costs, lower volume, yes.
Yeah, okay. So the unfunded depreciation beneath that, there's 0.5 in the long-term plan, but in the draft plan we've got 3.5 million allowed for. And I notice there's quite a up sweep in that in the last plan there as well. Is that got to be picked up somewhere else, or are we actually funding that 3.5 as part of our annual plan process?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the long-term plan assumed that in terms of our financial strategy, year 2 and year 3, we would continue to close the gap.
Yeah.
And so we would start to rate fund more depreciation. So it assumed that in year 3, the total amount of depreciation that was unfunded by rates was $500,000. The council, one of the ways in which we reduced our rates this financial year was we didn't close that funding gap, and we proposed not to close that gap for year 3. So what that means is the non-fund. So it's probably easier to point you to 22-23, which is year 2, the current financial year, has unfunded depreciation of 3.1. So we are below target. And what we've said is the unfunded depreciation largely relates to the Three Waters. Don't put that burden on to ratepayers now because the assets are going across. The uplift in depreciation for the Three Waters for next financial year is the 441. So that's why it's gone from 3.1 to 3.5.
Right, okay, gotcha. Okay, so it's a notation as such, rather than an actual, it's showing what we've got, the difference we've got to pick up at some stage, but basically we're expecting that to go to Three Waters.
Yes,
as such. Okay,
yes, so it is a public workshop, so look, there is, through you Mr Chair, there is risk. So what we're saying is, all our unfunded depreciation rates are Three Waters assets. The conversation we're having with DIA is to claim that back in terms of our payout on our debt. We have also been very clear that there is a risk. There is a risk that the Three Waters doesn't happen and we don't get paid for that unfunded depreciation, which means we are in essence kicking the can down the road. We will have to actually rate fund for that and claw it back. Okay. But at the moment, the position is that it is relating to the Three Waters. The Three Waters reform is happening. We have had conversations with DIA. We have discussed debt levels.
Cool, lovely. Thanks, Mark. Thank you for the clarity.
Councillor Coe.
Can we move forward to the progress update slide? Thank you. And firstly, can I just remind councillors and staff that we agreed a couple of meetings ago, I'm not quite sure when, to stop all the through you, Mr. Chair stuff. Personally, I find it gets in the way, and yeah. So feel free to not use that because it just, I find it annoying actually. Sorry. But anyway, just regarding the statement that says this is not one-off rates relief, as this currently discontinues beyond 1 July 2024. But yes, I can see that those assets are going to move across under Three Waters and we won't have that expenditure, but I'm presuming we also will not have the revenue that is associated with that either. So can we therefore still claim that it's not a one-off situation? And I'm really feeling ambushed, I have to say, with this annual plan. And I'm wanting to see what is the impact of Three Waters on our total operation. And I just have this really strong feeling we need to start that work sooner rather than later so that we can get a proper handle on it, because I'm feeling like it's all a bit murky at the moment. And can we not at least start, making some assumptions and doing some modelling around how things are going to look this time next year so we can play with some different scenarios, because I think I feel like we're kind of shooting into the dark here a wee bit.
Thank you, Councillor. There's a number of things there. So, yes, obviously we're losing revenue because we derive revenue from wastewater and from water and even stormwater. So that's all going to be transferred. So obviously there's rates revenue that we're giving up. What we're saying on the slide is we got the very clear message from this council: do not kick the can down the road. So we are reallocating $3.2 million towards expenditure that we will incur next year that we won't incur in the out years, and that's the maintenance of the Three Waters.
I get that. Yeah.
So we won't be maintaining Three Waters in 1 July 2024. So we will lose the revenue, but that's why we've said that we'll assign that to the maintenance of the Three Waters. In terms of feeling ambushed, we are actually doing lots of modelling. We're only at the point now LGFA, Standard & Poor's, ourselves have been working very closely with DIA, and we're only at that point now where they're starting to talk to us about what formulas they might use to indicate what level of payout we will get. We do have to model what is our balance sheet going to look like? What are our operations going to look like? So we're working as quickly and as closely as we can with DIA. But one of the things that holds true is that the reform takes effect from 1 July 2024. Three Waters will not be in the long-term plan. They will be in year 3. So it's business as usual. So we will be rating for water, stormwater and wastewater. We do have our maintenance program. We do have our capital program. And we will be doing a long-term plan. And as we work more closely with DIA and get more certainty, that will feed into the significant assumptions that go into the long-term plan. It'll also go into the financial modelling. So what we're presenting to you is the information that we have.
I guess the bit that I'm questioning is just that the statement that this is not one-off rates relief. I mean, if to my way of thinking, it is one-off, and we're just kind of hoping that things will shake out once we get to July next year, because we're losing the revenue as well as the expenditure. So it's maybe a splitting hairs, but
Well, we are coming.
Hear what you're saying, and part of the problem we've got with what's going on with the Three Waters is we don't know. And council staff are having to deal with that as well. We don't know. We haven't been told. Council's doing a lot of modelling at the moment, but they don't actually know either. And it might all change at elections again as well. We're getting it in all sorts of reform. It's been a constant problem over the last 3 years. Well, when this stuff started coming through, we're asking, can we make this allowance? No, we can't. But we've got to treat it as business as usual up until we're told differently. We're not allowed to do anything else. And it makes it, I'm sure, very stressful for staff with regards to trying to think about what that looks like moving forward. But they're between a rock and a hard place as well. This is one of the most distressing things about all this reform. As I think it will bigger belief how much work's already gone into this space, more than likely unfunded or minimally funded in regards to the funding that has been provided, and to regards to where we have to go. Because I've got a feeling this is going to end up like a COVID sort of scenario where we're given a very short period of time to adjust to it and told like it or lump it. It sucks, and it's part of it's part of what the problem is as part of this reform process. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm happy to go with it, but I just think we've got to keep our eye on this ball and look at what's likely to shake out of it and adjust our expenditure and so on the way through if we need to.
Well, I know Sean wants to say a word, so I guess having 2 minutes to think about what you're saying. So in part, you're right. It's not
a one-off situation, really.
So one-off. The reason why we've used one-off is because we've got the opportunity. So it's a one-off opportunity to use better off funding, which we're not going to get. So we know we've got tranche 1. We don't know about tranche 2. Hopefully we get 15.26 million. We don't know. But we heard very clearly from yourselves at workshop 1 or 2, you were happy to reprioritise the spending, but not on spending that we knew today goes downstream, every single year. So don't use it to offset staff costs or personnel when those positions will still be with us in future years. So our assumption is that the Three Waters are not with us in future years. So we have that one-off opportunity to use some funding that central government have given us to pay for expenditure this year, in 23-24, that we shouldn't have in 24-25. Things may change after elections, we don't know.
Do you want to say anything?
I'm not going to argue
Sean?
the point. Anyway.
I can make this comment. There is a briefing scheduled on the 2nd of May from DIA to us on a Three Waters update. I note it's only half an hour, which might be a little short. There's also an announcement. Sean's just told me that DIA is making an announcement sometime in the next couple of weeks of an update on that process as well. So it's probably a continuing watch this space, Liz. I think we're all interested in it. It's just there's no information really that's going to help us with forward planning at this stage. Councillor Warwick.
My question is around the rural rates, because in the last few years, the land capital value changed and rural rates had a big hike. Is that correct? There was a change in land value and capital value split.
Yeah, so thanks, Councillor. I think, I think from memory, the district-wide revaluations saw quite an uplift in the capital value of rural rates. But what particularly happened this financial year is the community facility rate, which is a fixed charge, was increased. I think it went up by nearly $900. So that had a huge impact on. So that's irrelevant of land value or capital value. It's a fixed charge. So that will contribute to the uplift.
So the $2,000 total current rates, what does that exclude? Because I'm rural and I can tell you that's about half a year of rates. So there's a whole lot more added onto that. And my question is, here's my question. When rural properties have septic tanks and water tanks, they're still expected to equally share the load of the rates to have infrastructure, urban infrastructure in towns and stuff, because we go into town and we use those facilities. And yet here, the other rate payers are the ones that are going to benefit from the better off funding and not the rural ratepayers. And yet, in one instance, we're asked to pay equally. I don't know, that just is a bit confusing to me. And then, because it's not in our area, we're not going to benefit equally, where our rates are going up more. Am I really confused?
No, Councillor, you're not confused. There's a couple of points. This is median property. In terms of that capital value for rural properties. So they are median properties. They are just KCDC rates. We don't have Greater Wellington Regional Council rates on there. Generally for rural properties, you don't pay water or wastewater for the reasons that you outlined. I know in terms of if you're within 100 metres of a water connection or a wastewater connection, you do pay because that connection has been made available. So it really does depend on the location of the property to the network. And yes, that's the reality. So that's the reality of the situation. But don't forget, for rural ratepayers, there are differentials as well that do kick in, which is probably not being shown in that example. So you've got differentials on your district-wide general rate, which does depend on the size of the property.
So who makes the decision not to?
So the reprioritisation of the better off funding, so our proposal is to reprioritise it, but to offset it against the costs that we don't anticipate will go beyond 30 June 2024. That's a council decision. The rating system is a blunt tool, which is what we've always said, and these are just examples.
Okay. I'm just conscious we're just quickly running out of time. The big chunky bit is the fees and charges probably. So one of the things I am noticing, and I'll just make this to elected members, we are asking questions that have been answered in previous workshops. And my expectation, and it would be nice for our staff to know, that we're actually paying attention to what's taken place in previous workshops. So I will ask Councillor Pravanov to bring her question.
Thank you. So following up on what Councillor Shelley has said, with rural ratepayers, I think it was mentioned that they pay no water and no wastewater rates, and I assume that they don't pay any stormwater rates. Who actually looks after their properties in relation to stormwater? Is that KCDC? Or is it no one?
Depending on what the issue is, really, they pay. So roading, there's a stormwater element, drainage element to transport. So we get a lot of rural inquiries about water races and flooding that relates to runoff from roads. So we respond in that space. Again, if it's a stream that floods, or if it depends if it's managed by Greater Wellington Regional Council, then they provide very limited response with regard to that. But if it's a flooding issue and there's no urban stormwater network, and it's an open drain or an asset like that, then that's down to the property owner currently. We do spend a lot of time responding and talking to rural ratepayers around stormwater issues. I've attended a number of meetings and staff respond and engage, but we don't capture rates to fund that. So that's the current system. And if you wanted to look at reviewing the rating system, there has been conversation about adding a stormwater element to some of the rural rates to cover some of the work that is already done in that space. But I expect that would get very big very quickly in terms of the scale of some of those issues. But that's the current status.
So thank you for that. And you know, I won't push too much further, but as you're aware, in the Peka Peka situation, people can't actually do anything about, or they couldn't do anything about the stormwater situation there because it wasn't initiated on their property, but they were impacted. And I think the argument that they have been told is that because they don't pay stormwater rates, then they're on their own.
Well, I guess that's I just explained in terms of the current policy. If you wanted to change that in the future, then maybe that's something you look at through the LGP.
Yep. Thank you.
Great. Bede? Sorry, Mr. Larissy.
I think this should be a quick one. Just on the median property values, Paraparamu, Raumati combined, now that we have Raumati constituted as a community, will we see those separated out in future years?
Yes, yes. So, yes, we will. It's a bit of a timing issue. So, when the council set the rates for the current financial year, that designation didn't effectively exist. So when we set rates for 23-24, there will be a community rate for the Raumati Community Board, and you'll see that breakdown.
Cool. Thank you.
If I may, I just wanted to comment on the comments that have been raised about the rural rate, and they're all absolutely valid. The reality is the rates are a blunt tool, and we do our best to make sure that the rating system is fair and equitable. And under legislation, we have to review it every 3 years. And we've always tried to. We've gone down the road of actually trying to go all capital value, and that wasn't acceptable. We've looked at various ways of trying to make it equitable. We obviously look at affordability at the same time. So we do try and make tweaks to make it fair and equitable. We like the a third land value, a third capital value, and a third fixed charge, as that on balance makes it fair for the district. But just looking at that rural median property on that slide, we've got a designation called rural village as well, and just looking at that land value, I can't see how that is a typical rural property. That could be in a rural village, and I suspect that example is not an example where the differentials on the land value chart on the district-wide general are coming into effect, which have the effect of reducing rates, because we recognise that a rural property with a very large land value shouldn't be paying a disproportionate amount of rates. But even with that example, without the details, it's literally just based on median. Yes, it's an 11%, and it's one of the I guess the disadvantages of always just focusing on the percentage. It's 11%, but if you look into the numbers, the rates, the rates bill is 2,068 current. With that 11% increase, it takes it to 2,296. Look at the rates bills of all the other properties; they're well in the threes, almost fours. And look at the increase per annum. It's 227, which compares pretty much bang on with a lot of the other urban properties. So this is the downside. This is why when we do inform the community, we've got to be very careful to do percentage in dollar terms, because there's a lot of context. If you just look at the percentage, it looks horrific, but look at what they're actually paying.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take a break now. So I'll say 15 minutes, back in here 20 to 12, and then we can get into the fees and charges. Thanks, everyone.